Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now, let's get into today's tale. Let me tell you something about humiliation. Real humiliation. The kind that burns your skin from the inside out. I was standing there. PowerPoint slide number 14 illuminated behind me, the culmination of 3 years of my life's work. When Vivana, our head of HR, actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A full-throated laugh that cut through the conference room like a blade. 1.5 million in projected annual savings per plant. Sweetheart, this isn't a fairy tale pitch session. We need realistic projections, not fantasy math. She didn't even look at my data. Years of testing, of staying until 2 a.m. running simulations, sacrificing weekends and relationships, reduced to fantasy math in front of every executive who mattered. I stood there, laser pointer trembling slightly in my hand, as 22 executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. The CEO, Brenner, just checked his watch. The co-Thorne suddenly became fascinated with his tablet. Nobody, not one person spoke up. Perhaps, Celine continued, her voice dripping with false concern, your talents would be better utilized in a more suitable position. This waste-to-energy conversion system you've been tinkering with isn't worth the coffee we served during this presentation. The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. I remember thinking how strange it was that I could hear my own heartbeat, but couldn't feel my fingertips. Years of my life. 3 years of solving what nobody else could solve. How to convert our manufacturing waste into clean energy that could power entire facilities. Erased in seconds by someone who couldn't tell a kilowatt from a kilobyte. What did I do? I thanked them for their time. I gathered my papers with steady hands. I smiled professionally, walked out with my head high, and then vomited in the bathroom. That was 9 months ago. My name is Eloan. I'm 34. And until recently, I was a senior engineer at one of the largest manufacturing corporations in the country. I specialized in sustainable energy systems and waste reduction. I've always been the type of person who sees inefficiency as a personal challenge. Whether it's figuring out the optimal grocery store route or redesigning an entire industrial waste management system. My friends call me stubbornly optimistic. My ex called me obsessive. I prefer to think of myself as relentlessly solution-oriented. Before I go any further with this story, could you please take a moment to tell me in the comments where you're watching from? I'm curious to know how far this reaches and if my story resonates with you at all. Please consider hitting that subscribe button. Trust me when I say, the ending is worth sticking around for. So there I was, effectively demoted to overseeing basic maintenance operations. My research budget slashed to zero. My team reassigned. My workspace relocated to a windowless office near the loading docks, where the constant beeping of reversing trucks became the soundtrack to my professional funeral. Meanwhile, I watched Kieran, who had been at the company 2 years less than me, and whose greatest innovation was finding ways to extend his lunch breaks, get promoted to lead the new sustainability initiatives department, the very department that should have been built around my waste conversion system. The pattern was painfully obvious. Griffin, Lennox, Wesley. All my male colleagues with less experience somehow moving up while I moved sideways and down. Each time, Celine would send the company-wide email announcing their promotions with glowing praise about innovative thinking and bold leadership. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you room to maneuver. When people think you're worthless, they stop watching you. I didn't argue with my reassignment. I didn't file a complaint. I didn't even confide in colleagues. Instead, I spent the next 6 weeks meticulously documenting every aspect of my research, while being careful not to violate any confidentiality agreements. I reviewed which components of my system were technically my intellectual property, developed before joining the company, and which belonged to my employer. I also began reaching out to old classmates from engineering school who had gone into patent law. Casual coffee, meetings, hypothetical questions, gathering information like squirrels gather nuts before winter. What Vivana and the others didn't understand was that my system wasn't just some minor improvement to existing technology. It was revolutionary. My waste-to-energy conversion process could reduce industrial waste by 87% while generating enough clean energy to power entire manufacturing facilities. The pilot tests I'd run in our smallest plant had exceeded even my own projections. But when you're a woman in engineering, revolutionary isn't enough. You need to be revolutionary while never making insecure men feel threatened by your intelligence. You need to be revolutionary while somehow giving them the impression that your ideas were actually theirs all along. You need to be revolutionary while remaining decorative. I'd failed at playing that game, so I decided to change the rules entirely. Days after my humiliation in that boardroom, I submitted my resignation letter. 2 weeks' notice, professionally worded, expressing gratitude for the opportunities I'd been given. HR conducted an exit interview where Selena asked perfunctory questions while checking her phone. "Where are you headed next?" she asked without looking. "Up. I'm exploring some opportunities," I replied. That finally caught her attention. "You're quitting without another job lined up? In this economy?" She actually smirked. "Bold move, Kaylin." "Sometimes you have to bet on yourself," I said. She gave me that condescending head tilt that women like her have perfected. "Well, good. Luck with whatever comes next. Though if things don't work out, we might have some entry-level positions opening up in the spring." I smiled, thanked her for her time, and walked out of that building for the last time. What Vivana didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd spent the past 2 months completely redesigning my waste conversion system from the ground up. Different approach, different components, different processes, but achieving the same revolutionary results. I had been careful to do this work on my own time, on my own equipment, using knowledge that existed in the public domain. With my savings and a small loan, I founded Astra Engineering Consultants. Just me, working from my apartment with a sleek website and business cards that cost more than I could afford. I spent 16 hours a day refining my new system design, running virtual simulations, and perfecting the technical specifications. During the day, I made cold calls to small manufacturing operations, offering conventional efficiency consultations to keep some money coming in. At night, I worked on my real goal, creating a waste-to-energy system that would make my former employers' jaw drop. A system they couldn't claim as their own. 3 months after leaving, I filed my first patent application. 2 weeks later, I filed 2 more. The patent attorney, Sel, was initially skeptical, but became increasingly impressed as she reviewed my technical specifications. "This is exceptional work," she said during our 3rd meeting. "I've represented dozens of energy startups, and I've never seen conversion efficiency numbers like these. Are you certain about these calculations?" "I've triple-checked everything," I told her. "These numbers are actually conservative estimates." She looked at me with new respect. "You realize what you have here, right? This isn't just a consulting business. This technology could transform industrial energy consumption globally." I knew exactly what I had. I'd known for 3 years. The problem was scaling up. I needed capital to build a demonstration model. I needed connections to get meetings with decision makers at major manufacturing companies. I needed resources I didn't have. What I did have was determination fueled by the memory of Celine's laugh echoing through that conference room. Months after starting Astra, I got my first break. A contact from my university days, Zephyr, had become the sustainability director at one of the smaller regional manufacturers. He agreed to meet me for coffee, mostly out of courtesy to our shared past. I brought my laptop and simulation data. I expected perhaps 20 minutes of his time. We talked for 3 hours. By the end, he was texting his CEO asking for an emergency meeting. Days later, I found myself in another conference room facing another group of executives. But this time, they were listening. Really listening. When I finished my presentation, there was a moment of silence before their CEO, Niara, spoke. What would it cost to implement a pilot program in our Denver facility? I gave her the number I'd calculated, a fraction of what the technology was worth, but enough to prove the concept. She didn't flinch. How soon can you start? Weeks later, my system was installed in their smallest manufacturing facility. 8 weeks after that, the data came in. 83% waste reduction, and enough energy generation to cover 64% of the facility's needs. Not the 87% I'd achieved in my previous company's tests, but still revolutionary. Niara called me personally when she saw the numbers. We need to implement this across all our facilities immediately, and Kaylin, we're not the only ones who will want this technology. She was right. Within days of Niara mentioning my work at an industry conference, my phone started ringing, small, and mid-sized manufacturers at first, then larger operations. I hired 2 engineers I trusted to help with the increasing workload, then 4 more. Astra was growing. But I hadn't forgotten about my former employer. In fact, everything I was doing was building toward the moment when our paths would cross again. That moment came sooner than I expected. I was reviewing implementation plans with my team when my assistant, Sol, interrupted. "There's a call you might want to take. It's from Paragon Industries." My heart stuttered. Paragon was my former company's biggest competitor. They controlled roughly 38% of the market, compared to my ex-employer's 42%. I took the call in my office. The voice on the other end belonged to Paragon's Chief Innovation Officer, Nico. "Miss Elone, I'll cut to the chase. We've been hearing impressive things about your waste-to-energy conversion system. Our technical team has reviewed the publicly available information on your patents. And to put it bluntly, we want this technology implemented across all our facilities." I gripped the phone tighter. "I appreciate your interest, but Astra is currently at capacity with our existing clients. We might be able to schedule a pilot program in about 8 months. That won't work for us." Nico replied, "We don't want to wait in fact, we don't just want to be clients. We want exclusivity." My pulse quickened. Exclusivity. We want to license your technology for all our facilities, and we want Astra as our exclusive implementation consultants. More importantly, we want to ensure our competitors, particularly your former employers, cannot access this technology. He named a figure for the licensing rights alone, $3 million upfront. Then he named another figure for the consultation contract to implement the system across their 47 facilities over 3 years, $12 million. The room seemed to tilt. These numbers would transform Astra from a promising startup into an established industry player overnight. But more than that, they represented something I hadn't dared hope for. Leverage. "I'll need to review this with my team and legal counsel," I said, proud of how steady my voice remained. "Of course, we'll send over the proposed terms today, but Miss Ellen," there was a pause. "We're aware of your history with our competitors. Consider this an opportunity for mutual benefit." After we hung up, I sat motionless at my desk. $15 million, a guaranteed 3-year contract, the resources to expand Astra beyond anything I'd imagined possible in such a short time, and the chance to show my former company exactly what they had thrown away. I called Sol into my office, cancel my meetings for the rest of the day, and get Marin on the phone. "We have a contract to review." That night, as I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the city lights, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about success anymore. This wasn't even about validation. This was about justice, cold calculated and coming due. What happened next would change everything. Not just for me, not just for Astra, but for hundreds of innocent people who had nothing to do with Seleni's cruelty or my former company's short-sightedness. That's the part that still keeps me awake sometimes. The part that makes me question whether the price of justice was too high. 2 weeks after that phone call with Nico, I sat in Paragon's headquarters, signing the final contracts. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't waver. I was no longer the woman trembling with a laser pointer while being publicly humiliated. I was the CEO of Astro Engineering, signing an 8-figure deal that would revolutionize an industry. The press release went out the following morning: Paragon Industries partners with Astro Engineering to implement revolutionary waste to energy technology. Industry publications picked it up immediately. Our website traffic increased by 3,000% in a single day. My LinkedIn messages exploded. The only response I truly cared about hadn't come yet. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days after the announcement, I received a text from Cassian, who had been my closest friend at my former company before I left. "Absolute chaos here, emergency board meeting called. Brenner is on the warpath. Just thought you should know." I sent back a single question mark, playing innocent. "Your deal with Paragon. It's all anyone's talking about?" Celine looks like she's about to combust. Smiled at my phone phase. One complete. But the real revenge hadn't even started yet. See, in the manufacturing world, Clients pay attention to innovation, they pay attention to efficiency, and they pay very close attention to their competitors' advantages. Exactly 8 days after our partnership announcement, Paragon received an inquiry from TELUS Corporation, my former employer's largest client. TELUS represented nearly 20% of their annual revenue, roughly $28 million. They wanted to know more about this waste-to-energy system that industry analysts were calling the most significant advancement in industrial sustainability of the decade. Nico forwarded me their email with a single sentence: "I believe this is what victory looks like." I didn't respond, but that night I opened an expensive bottle of wine I'd been saving and toasted myself in my empty apartment. The first domino had fallen precisely as I'd predicted. 2 weeks later, representatives from TELUS visited Paragon's pilot facility where we'd already implemented the first phase of my system. I wasn't there. I made sure to be conveniently scheduled at another client site. But Nico sent me video of their reactions as they watched the system in operation, their expressions as they reviewed the waste reduction, numbers, their whispered conversations when they thought no one was listening. The following week, TELUS requested a meeting with my team at Astra. I sent my chief technical officer, Ria, with strict instructions on what information could be shared and what remained proprietary. She called me the minute the meeting ended. They asked about integration timelines. She said, excitement making her voice higher than usual. "Not if but when they're going to switch from your old company to Paragon. It's happening." Kaylani closed my eyes, letting the moment wash over me. "Thank you for letting me know. Aren't you excited? This is huge." "I'm processing," I told her. I couldn't explain that my feelings were more complicated than simple excitement. This was the revenge I'd planned, but now that it was unfolding, I felt strangely hollow. Days later, my former company's stock dropped 7% on rumors that they were about to lose a major client. The business news channels began speculating, industry analysts started asking questions about their innovation pipeline and sustainability initiatives. The vultures were circling. Then came the call I'd been both dreading and anticipating, alone. "It's Brenner." The CEO's voice sounded different than I remembered. Tighter, less assured. "This is a surprise," I said, keeping my tone professionally neutral while my heart hammered against my ribs. "Think we should meet. There are some misunderstandings I'd like to clear up." "What kind of misunderstandings?" "About your departure from our company, about your research. I believe there may have been some miscommunication regarding its value to our organization." I nearly laughed. Miscommunication. I'd stood in front of their entire executive team while Celine publicly eviscerated 3 years of my work. "I appreciate the call, Brenner, but I'm afraid my schedule is completely full for the foreseeable future. Astra is implementing our technology across multiple client sites, and my time is no longer my own. We're prepared to make a very generous offer to bring you back along with your technology. Whatever Paragon is paying you will exceed it." Now I did laugh, the sound sharp enough to cut. I'm not an employee anymore. "Brenner, I'm the CEO of a company that's valued at 9 figures. As of our last funding round, you can't afford me. And more importantly, you can't afford my technology. Alone, be reasonable. I was reasonable when I spent 3 years developing a system that would have saved your company millions annually. I was reasonable when I presented meticulously documented research proving its effectiveness. I was reasonable when Selene called my work fantasy math and you all sat there silently. I think I've been entirely too reasonable up to this point." There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its diplomatic veneer. "Do you understand what you're doing? TELUS is preparing to terminate their contract with us. That's hundreds of jobs potentially at risk, people with families with mortgages. Is your pride worth their livelihoods?" The question hit me like a physical blow, not because it wasn't something I'd considered, but because it was exactly what had kept me awake for the past several nights. "Don't you dare put that on me," I said quietly. I offered your company a revolutionary system for a fraction of what it was worth. You had every opportunity to implement it. The responsibility for those jobs rests with the people who made decisions based on ego rather than data. It rests with you, Brenner. "This isn't over," he said before hanging up. He was right about that. At least it wasn't over. The following morning, my former company issued a press release announcing a new groundbreaking waste management initiative that sounded suspiciously similar to early versions of my system. They claimed their research team had been developing it for years. I forwarded the press release to Maureen with a single question: "Is this actionable?" Her response came within the hour. "Absolutely, they're describing technology covered by your patents, just using different terminology. I'll prepare the cease and desist today, 2 hours later. Cassian texted me again. They're pulling all your old research files. Celine is telling everyone you stole company, intellectual property. It's getting ugly. I wasn't surprised. Desperate people make desperate claims, but I had been meticulous about documentation, about which aspects of my research predated my employment, about developing my patented system using entirely different approaches. After I left, the legal notice from my former employer arrived the next day, claiming I had misappropriated confidential information and demanding immediate cessation of my partnership with Paragon. Sorel's response was swift and devastating. She sent back a detailed analysis of why their claims were baseless, along with evidence that their newly announced initiative actually infringed on my patents. Not the other way around, she concluded with, our own demand. They could either license my technology for twice what Paragon had paid, or face an infringement lawsuit that would cost them far more in the long run. Their response, silence. Days later, the announcement everyone had been anticipating. Finally, Camatelis Corporation was terminating their long-standing contract with my former employer and moving their business to Paragon Industries, specifically citing advanced sustainability capabilities as the deciding factor in former companies. Stock plunged 23% in a single day. Then came the news I hadn't wanted to hear but knew was inevitable. They were laying off 300 workers from the division that had handled the TLIS account. 300 people who had nothing to do with what happened to me, 300. Families facing uncertainty because of a battle between executives and the woman they had underestimated. I sat alone in my office that night, staring at the names and faces on the company's internal directory that Cassian had sent me. People who would be receiving termination notices the next morning. Maintenance workers, administrative staff, production line operators, not the executives who had humiliated me. Not Celine, who was reportedly still employed, regular people who had been caught in the crossfire of corporate warfare. That night, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my revenge. The next morning, I called a meeting with my leadership team at Astra. I want to open a new operations center, I told them, and I want to locate it in the same city as my former employer's main facility. Looked confused. Why there specifically? Real estate costs are higher, and we don't have any existing client base in that region, because 300 skilled workers just became available, and I intend to hire as many of them as we can absorb. Understanding dawned on their faces. Maeve, my operations director, leaned forward. This isn't just business, this is personal for you. I nodded slowly. Yes, but it can be both. These people have skills we need as we expand. They know the industry, and they've just been discarded by a company that values quarterly profits over human potential. I looked around the room. Isn't that precisely the kind of thinking we started Astra to counter? We moved quickly. Within 2 weeks, we had leased a facility less than 3 miles from my former employer's main campus. We placed prominent job ads, specifically targeting recently displaced workers from the manufacturing sector. We offered relocation assistance for those who had already moved away. And then I did something that ensured Celine and Brenner couldn't possibly miss what was happening. I scheduled a community job fair and invited local media coverage. The event was scheduled for a Tuesday evening. I arrived early, watching as our team set up the Astra banners and information stations. By 5:45 in the evening, 15 minutes before the official start time, the line stretched around the building. Former colleagues whom I recognized. Faces I'd seen in the company directory. Families with anxious expressions. I greeted each person individually. Making eye contact, learning names, listening to stories. Many recognized me. Some had heard rumors about why I'd left. A few even apologized for not speaking up when Selene had humiliated me. I'm not here for apologies, I told one former manufacturing supervisor named Talon. I'm here because Astra needs talented people, and I know exactly where to find them. By the end of the evening, we had collected over 200 resumes and scheduled 86 interviews. The local news ran a story about the startup offering second chances to displaced workers, featuring footage of me speaking with former colleagues. I made sure Astra's social media team shared the coverage everywhere. The next morning, my phone rang with a number I recognized all too well. Celine from HR. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times before leaving a message. This little recruiting stunt you're pulling is transparent and beneath you. If you think poaching our former employees will somehow damage our organization, you're sorely mistaken. Some friendly advice: focus on running your company instead of pursuing vendettas. I saved the message but didn't respond. I didn't need to. The facts would speak for themselves. Over the next month, Astra hired 173 people who had been laid off by my former employer. We created a specialized training program to bring them up to speed on our technology. We promoted from within, elevating talented individuals who had been overlooked in their previous roles. And then, exactly 5 months after the first layoffs, we launched our most aggressive move yet. We announced a new division of Astra, focused on retrofitting existing industrial systems with our waste-to-energy technology, targeted specifically at companies using my former employer's outdated equipment. The message was clear. We weren't just taking their people and their clients. We were making their entire technological approach obsolete. The industry noticed. More clients began switching, more layoffs followed, and with each new round, Astra was there, offering positions, training, and something my former employer had failed to provide: respect. 8 months after I had stood trembling in that conference room, my former company announced they were exploring strategic alternatives, corporate speak for putting themselves up for sale. Their stock had fallen 68% from its high. Their most innovative employees now worked for me. Their largest clients had defected to Paragon or other competitors using Astra's technology. And Celine? She was finally let go, though they called it a mutual separation. According to Cassian, she had been escorted from the building by security. Her personal items shipped to her home later. The day that news broke, I received a text message from an unknown number. I hope you're satisfied with what you've done. You've destroyed lives to soothe your ego. It was unsigned, but I knew who it was from. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I didn't destroy anything. I built something. The difference matters. Then I blocked the number. 2 weeks later, I stood in Astra's new headquarters, a renovated industrial space with floor-to-ceiling windows and an open concept design that encouraged collaboration. Around me, nearly 300 employees worked at modernizing an industry that had resisted change for decades. Many of them had previously worked for the company that had dismissed me and my ideas. Brenner had been right about one thing: actions have consequences for innocent people. But what he failed to understand was that those consequences don't have to be negative. The same decision that cost some people their jobs had created new opportunities for those same individuals, often better paying positions, with more room for growth. The day my former company officially announced its acquisition by a foreign conglomerate, for a fraction of its previous valuation, I didn't celebrate. Instead, I gathered Astra's leadership team. Phase 1 is complete, I told them. We've proven our technology, established our market position, and built an exceptional team. Now we move to Phase 2, expanding globally. All grinned. World domination? I shook my head. World transformation. There's a difference. As I look back now, I realize that the most satisfying part of my revenge wasn't watching my former company crumble or seeing Celine lose her position. It wasn't even the financial success of Astra. Though I won't pretend the money doesn't matter. The true satisfaction came from creating something meaningful from the ashes of humiliation, from turning fantasy math into industry-changing reality, from taking people who had been discarded and helping them become part of something revolutionary. Did I set out for revenge? Absolutely. Did I get it? Beyond my wildest expectations. But revenge alone is empty. It's what you build after the fire that truly matters. Today, Astra employs over 500 people. Our technology has been implemented in manufacturing facilities across 12 countries. We've reduced industrial waste by millions of tons and generated clean energy that would otherwise have come from fossil fuels. The patents that my former employer dismissed as worthless are now valued at over $200 million. And me? I'm no longer defined by that moment of humiliation in a sterile conference room. I'm defined by what I chose to do afterward. If you're watching this and you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or humiliated, know this: your response to that moment will shape you far more than the moment itself. Choose wisely. Choose creation over destruction whenever possible. But never, ever allow someone else's failure to see your worth, determine what you're capable of achieving. If my story resonated with you at all, please hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Drop a comment below with your own experience of being underestimated. I read every single one. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's success that transforms an entire industry while lifting others along with you. That's not just revenge, that's revolution. Revenge, that's revolution.